Hello friends. In my last video I was sick and I took too much NyQuil, so I was kind of just rambling on, not getting to the point very quickly. Also, I wasn't expecting the algorithm to pick up that video. I was just playing video games and just rambling. So I'm going to try to be a little more concise in this video so we can get to the point a little bit faster. Why don't we start with some scripture? We have John chapter 15 verse 18. If the world hates you, keep in mind that it hated me first. If you belonged to the world, it would love you as its own. As it is, you do not belong to the world, but I have chosen you out of the world. That is why the world hates you. Remember what I told you. A servant is not greater than his master. If they persecuted me, they will persecute you also. If they obeyed my teaching, they will obey yours also. They will treat you this way because of my name, for they do not know the one who sent me. If I had not come and spoken to them, they would not be guilty of sin. But now they have no excuse for their sin. Whoever hates me hates my Father as well. If I had not done among them the works no one else did, they would not be guilty of sin. As it is, they have seen, and yet they have hated both me and my Father. But this is to fulfill what is written in their law. They hated me without reason. Okay, that's a great one. That's a really great one. Let's hop over to 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 7 to 10. And lest I should be exalted above measure, this is Paul, by the way. And lest I should be exalted above measure by the abundance of the revelations, a thorn in the flesh was given to me, a messenger of Satan to buffet, lest I be exalted above measure. Concerning this thing, I pleaded with the Lord 3 times that it might depart from me. And he said to me, my grace is sufficient for you, for my strength is made perfect in weakness. Therefore, most gladly I will rather boast in my infirmities, that the power of Christ may rest upon me. Therefore, I take pleasure in infirmities, in reproaches, in need, in persecution, in distresses, for Christ's sake. For when I am weak, then I am strong. This is a really great way of leading me into talking about Saturn. By the way, if you watch my last video, you may get the sense that I am some kind of pagan who doesn't like Christianity. I actually like Christianity a lot. Do I believe the Bible is top to bottom the inerrant word of God, translated down to man? No. But what I think it is I think it's a bunch of mystics who are interpreting the divine and how the divine acts out through the stories that are told in the world. And I think, like a lot of religions, they were giving their interpretation of how the divine works in the world, and I think it tracks very well. I really like a lot of virtues of Christianity, principally the idea of the 7 deadly sins, which is not scriptural, and also just the idea of Christ as a figure of love and forgiveness, I think is really super awesome. Yeah, to be virtuous is really a good thing. So the 7 deadly sins is in an oppositional sense to the heavenly virtues, which are to be cultivated. And we can draw from other spiritual systems to really understand why that's important. And I've talked about it in other videos on this channel, and the idea is samskar. So if you're new to this channel, I talk about the mirror world. The mirror world is basically the idea that God is a mirror, and a mirror of consciousness. And so everything we are experiencing is just reflections of the consciousness of God, which can manifest as impressions that we make on our souls, which are then reflected outward as our experience. So it's important to understand that we need to take responsibility for the things that we're seeing in our experience, the people we're encountering in our experience, because these are reflections in the mirror of consciousness, which we will call God. And the term I use is the term in Hindu philosophy, Indian philosophy, as a understanding of the mechanism behind karma, and the term is samskar, and the spelling would read more like samskara, and this refers to impressions that are made in the mind as the basis for the karma that we attract. And so I extrapolate this to mean that these things are reflected outward as our experience, and they're not limited to our present lifetime. We've had a lot of lifetimes. The idea that we die and go to Sky Disney. We have one lifetime and we die and go to Sky Disney, or we go burn on the lake of fire forever, is for one, non-scriptural. It's not in the Bible, but also it's just on its face kind of absurd, I think, for pretty obvious reasons. Really what's true is that we are born into this life to have an evolutionary experience. Involution, first and foremost. That's what I mean by descending souls, is that consciousness wants to have knowledge of God, and we can only understand things by contrast, so we need to maximize distance from God to understand what it's like to not have God, which is what the descending soul journey is, which is what we would call the demonic people of this world, or what I call the people of lead. And yeah, they're part of the Kali Yuga progression that are being born over and over again, not to get better, but actually to get worse. It's a form of involution until they actually develop so much bad karma that their psychological experience becomes so unbearably tormenting for themselves. They're in so much pain that they willingly choose to become a more simple form of life. And so they have involution back into the forms of animals as a kind of quarantine for the severity of the sickness of their mind. They resolve that in an incomplete and ineffectual way by simply making their consciousness more limited, more unconscious, and more simplistic, and more in the senses. So I talked about in my last video, they sink into the earth, and so they become an animal. Their belly turns down to the earth, like most quadruped animals. But there's also, of course, the ascending souls. This is when the maximum saturation of unconsciousness and negative samskars, negative impressions, images that are cultivated in the souls, intentions, energies are cultivated in the soul, which are reflected hours of experience. We reach a maximum saturation, and the evolutionary impetus of God, which we'll call Pluto, the polarity shifts. So we say that the descending soul has negative polarity because they are born here to get worse and to develop more negative samskars so that they can move away from God. And then when we reach a maximum saturation, they become an ascending soul and they develop positive polarity, which means that their soul's journey is now focused on returning back to God and shedding the things that we've immersed ourselves in the world. Descending souls are here to immerse themselves as deeply into the world as possible, and ascending souls have the dubious and unpleasant honor of shedding all of these things that we've attached to, which of course is painful, like a root canal, uprooting ourselves from the world, but the roots have nerves and it hurts a lot. So yeah, that's a quick crash course of the Chosen One thing, and I also have a video on this channel called Chosen for What? Crash course on the Chosen One concepts that kind of goes into this a lot. But for the new viewers, that's pretty much the idea. And in my last video, I talked about the cycle of the superior planets. This is basically based off of Hermeticism, the idea of as within, so without, as above, so below. The planets are not just gods. They are the hands of God, but they're also representative in ourselves. So, in other words, when the planets make their formations, they can be reliably expected to create changes in our own psychological being as well, which is proof that the planets don't just operate outside of ourselves, they're also inside of ourselves. So as within, so without, right? And this cycle of the exaltation of the superior planets represents growth, and then perfection, and then decay, and then the lowest point, the Negretto, the dark night of the soul, the abyss, the lowest point. But today in this video, I do want to focus on that lowest point, that Negretto, that Saturn. Now, Negretto is the blackness, and Saturn is also the blackness. Saturn rules, of course, lead, and pretty much all of the ancients associated Saturn with blackness. Probably principally because the actual sphere of Saturn, from our standpoint, the planet from the stargazer, they saw it as the dimmest of the planets associated with blackness. So a lot of what we were talking about in those scriptures earlier, we can relate back to Saturn. So the idea is our samskars, our impressions, are all sorted and housed into these planets. They store our mental images and impressions, our intentions, which are then reflected outward as our experience based on a timeline that is appropriate to God's will, but which is also trackable in techniques like zodiacal releasing, which breaks down to years, down to weeks, down to days, down to minutes, every sub-period of everything that happens in our lives. And so basically every moment is accounted for with astrology, and it's all kind of like a timeline of when things are to be activated. So we have these impressions that are inside of ourselves, these intentions, these images, and they're projected outward as our experience. And the timing of those projections are based off of the activations that can be seen in techniques of astrology like zodiacal releasing. But when I say that, yes, they are present in all of the planets, but principally a really effective way of understanding the most important cycles and expressions of these projected samskars, these projected intentions and images and experiences, our karma projected, the reflection of the mirror God. They're sorted principally in these four planets, in Saturn, in the Sun, and then Jupiter and Mars. But mainly we can think of Saturn and the Sun. The Sun, if we want to make this in a really simple, easy to understand way, the Sun represents our highest points and our most desirable elements, and it contains and holds our most desirable samskars, our most desirable inner images and intentions and history, our history of all the actions we've taken and how it's shaped our soul. The high points, the glory, the beauty, the splendor, all of that is in the Sun. And the opposite is in Saturn. So Saturn holds the lead. Saturn holds the shadow, right? We talk about in the Jungian psychology, the shadow, the elements of the mind that we regard as undesirable and which we reject and we repress into unconsciousness. This is also true at the level of the soul, and Saturn is what's responsible for this. In fact, a really interesting relation between the Sun and Saturn is in the Greek magical papyri, which is a text a Greco-Egyptian text from the classical period that contains a number of different rituals that have been collected throughout the history of Egypt's magical history. There's an interesting section that is kind of broken up in that the original papyrus has degraded, and so a lot of the pieces of it are lost. The text is lost, but it's a section in there that is titled how to build a relationship with Helios, or something to that effect, which is of course the Greek name for the sun god. And it's basically broken up into 3 parts, but a really interesting part of this rite is that the second part of it is called how to gain control of your shadow. So it's a ritual intended to give you control of your actual shadow, to basically make it a servant of yours, to make it do the things that you want it to do, which I found really interesting. There's a lot of parallels between the shadow and Saturn, and the sun and brightness. Of course, Saturn generally rules shade, and interestingly, in the Picatrix, which is a grimoire of astrological magic from the early medieval Islamic culture, there's all kinds of different rituals for all kinds of different planets, but there's this really interesting section in Book 3, Chapter 8, which discusses what the Nabateans, which, as I recall, were a slave class of the Chaldeans, which are some of the originators of astrology, or at least some of the greatest propitiators and builders of the astrological theory. This section ignores all the other planets and only focuses on the sun and Saturn as being the prayers that the Nabateans used to remediate their fate and to create good luck. So yeah, I've been finding that really most of the bad luck does come from Saturn, and most of the good luck does come from the sun. And so I wanted to read an excerpt from Book 3, Chapter 7 of the Picatrix, which is how the ancients of the medieval period in the Islamic culture viewed Saturn. And maybe I can get to the sun after that. But this is just an old ancient reading of the qualities of these planets to kind of give you a sense of what's controlling our fate. Okay, and the section reads, next I have determined to write the natures of each of the planets and the things appropriate to them, and what each of them signifies. This begins with Saturn. As before, Saturn is cold and dry, and infortune, so it's unfortunate, it's malefic. Destructive, the source of bad and foul odors. Proud and a traitor, because when he makes any promise, he betrays it. He signifies farmers, streams, those who work in the earth, controversies, great and long journeys, great and enduring enmities, bringing evils, battles, and all things unwanted, and the power to make and work. True speech, hope, blackness, age, buildings, fear, great thoughts, cares, angers, betrayals, sorrows, anguish, death, inheritances, orphans, old places, appraisals, proper elocution, secret sciences, secret meanings, and profound knowledge. He signifies all the foregoing when he is direct in his motion. So wow, this is Saturn on a good day. This is Saturn when he's moving forward. If you don't know astrology, retrogradation is when there's an optical illusion in the sky where it looks like a planet is moving backwards, and this has astrological significance. It signifies that the planet is in an unhealthy state that brings dysfunctional results for that planet and the things associated with it. In fact, right now Venus is retrograde. It continues, it says, when he is retrograde, however, he signifies misfortune, debilities, or infirmities. Remember we were talking about that scripture from before, how Paul was gracious and appreciative for his infirmities? Okay, it reads on. Prisons and evils suffered in all things. And if he enters into aspect, an aspect is a degree relationship with another planet, so they could be aligned, or they could be an opposite sign, so they're opposite across from each other, or they could be at a 90-degree angle, or you have that's called a square, or you could be at 30 degrees from each other, that's called a sextile, which is a good aspect, or a 120 degrees called a trine, which is a really good aspect. And if he enters into aspect with any other planet, he weakens it and damages all the qualities of the other planet. If he is retrograde and you ask him for something, what you seek will come about with delays and miseries and great labor. If he is retrograde in any of his dignities, his maledictions are augmented and increased, while if he rises in his powers and dignities, then he will be easier and gentler. Okay, that's Saturn, and wow, just sounds like, wow, this is the source of all terrible things. Like, all the bad things that happen are coming from Saturn. We're gonna leave it there. So yeah, when we got to saying how basically most of our good samskars, most of our good impressions in our history and our images that we've cultivated throughout our many lifetimes are housed in the sun and Saturn. All the good stuff, the glories, the greatest peaks are in the sun, and the terrible, unpleasant things, the lead. We say the sun rules gold. It's the gold of our history. It's our those samskars that are appropriate to the Satya Yuga, the golden age. But we're not in the golden age. We are in the Kali Yuga, which they call the Iron Age, but which I think would be much more appropriately called the age of lead, of the base worthless metal. And remember, the entire purpose of alchemy, among other things like the Philosopher's Stone and the Elixir of Immortality, is to transmute base metals into precious metals. So to transmute lead into gold. So yeah, Saturn holds most of the our unpleasant history. So how this works is, when we say a projection, we say a samskar is a projection, it's not a hologram, it's not like the Matrix or something, or Tron. Really, what it is there's laws of resonance that bring together fragments of consciousness. Fragments of consciousness meaning, like, once again, the mirror God is fragmented and it becomes all kinds of different things, the 10,000 things. Some of those 10,000 things are people, and so there's laws of resonance that bring us together, and that samskar is the magnet that draws it together based off of the principle of similarity. Because that aspect of ourselves is part of our history, it's going to come back to us in the form of a person that was us in that previous lifetime, someone just like us in that previous lifetime. So to be born into the Kali Yuga, which is what we have, these are the thorns that are given to us in the flesh to keep us humble and to keep us from being prideful, as 2 Corinthians says. This falls under the jurisdiction of Saturn. And now here's the question: is where do demons come into this? Like, sure, we're attracting these people, but I mean, come on, man. It seems like these people are being body snatched. It feels like something is coming into them and taking them over and attacking us, right? It seems like demons are attacking us, and the answer is yes, they are. Yes, they absolutely are. But the demon is part of them. So in other words, here's a good question, right? If we accept the premise of karma as being true, then are these people that attack us, are they receiving any karma? Are they having any bad karma for the things that they're doing? I mean, really, if it's straight up possession and something's taking them over, then how can it be said that they're responsible for that? And the honest and true answer is yes, they are receiving karma for that, because they are giving shelter to a demon, and they are cultivating a relationship with a demon. We are always cultivating relationships with spirits, and that's shaping our soul, and it's shaping our identity, and it's shaping our future. It's the samskars, it's our intentions. They may forget, and they may have amnesia of the things they do, but that's simply repression, and we're repressing those contents into the shadow. But Saturn rules the shadow, and Saturn rules karma. And Saturn is the disciplinarian, and Saturn makes sure that you pay what you owe. All debts are paid with Saturn, right? No one makes it through this life without experiencing themselves fully. And that's really what the addictive nature of the people of the world want. Is they want, no, get that Saturn out of here, man. I want eternal light. I want eternal brightness. I want every day to be a day at the beach, a sunny day at the beach, all smiles and sunshine. Yeah, no, it doesn't work like that, because every light casts a shadow. And so there is the sun and there is Saturn. And so people want to have all the good stuff, and so they repress all the bad stuff into the back of their mind, into the back of their soul. Saturn doesn't forget. Saturn brings it back. That's why you're born into the Kali Yuga. But once again, we just talked about how Saturn is this really awful, terrible planet that brings all these unwanted, unpleasant things. Really, this is the planet that is responsible for all your bad luck in life, in a manner of speaking. Of course, it's your choices and the samskars that you cultivate that bring you there, right? If all of your samskars were pure, then they wouldn't be stored in Saturn, right? You would be beyond Saturn. But the interesting thing is how demons figure into this, because so much of our bad karma seems to come in the form of what we call spiritual attack, demonic attack. And in this moment, we really come to realize the true beauty of Saturn and God, really, because the amazing thing about God is the logos that comes with God, the organizing divine principle, the logic, the ability of God to perfectly control everything it touches. God is a non-dual light that expands out into darkness, into a primordial, chaotic darkness. The example of God as the Logos is the fine-tuning of the universe. It's the cosmological constants. It's the gravitational constants. There's about several dozen principles of physics and constants of the universe that if they were off by like 0.000000000000001%, the entire universe would be unstable and it would collapse in and of itself. And certainly if the universe was stable to not be self-defeating or rendered absurd to the point of collapsing in on itself, it certainly wouldn't be habitable by life without this divine logos of God, which gives order to life in a way that everything that happens is tightly within control in a way such that stories can be told in the universe. Okay? So the possibilities that are chaotic and absurd and render the universe self-defeating and just a complete goddamn clusterfuck. We have in the human body an amazing bilateral symmetry, and in many other animals, it's form, it's beautiful logical form. Whereas if we were outside of that 0.00 whatever range, that represents the chaotic possibilities, which are almost infinite. So again, the orderly possibilities, which allow for stories to be told, are almost like impossibly small. 0.00001%. Well, what's the difference of 100% and 0.001%? Like 99.99999% of possibilities are chaotic and absurd. They result in extreme agony if consciousness and life can even exist. Most of the time, the absurdity of chaos just breaks consciousness, right? So that's why it is the darkness. And really what demons are is they are the archetypal forms of consciousness that were roused out of non-existence when the light burst into existence to emerge into it. So the demons are disgruntled and they hate the light because the light awoke them from a slumber. If there was no light, there would be no consciousness. There would be no stories being told. There would be no form or structure. It would just be nullification. And because the light came into the world and roused out of that darkness consciousness, these beings of consciousness that resided in the darkness, now awoken, are very upset and they want the light to stop. But how great is God and the logos of God that hilariously they have no power. Demons have literally no power at all. They have no ability to exert their own will on the world. And why is that? It's because God is in control of them. We go back to the story of Job. Satan, the adversary angel that came to God to test Job, he couldn't take a single action without asking for God's permission. That is a myth, that is a story that is representative of the greater divine truth that the Logos bends the will of the demons to God's will. So demons exert their will in the world, but only as God allows it. And what I've just said is the definition of Saturn. And that's the deep, deep, deep wisdom regarding Saturn. Is we say Saturn is the evil planet. It's like, no, Saturn is the closest of all the traditional planets to God. Can't you see? If we have to go outward from Earth to get to God, and Saturn is beyond the sun. Saturn is the farthest visible planet. It's the closest to God. It's the closest to the source. This primordial chaos, if it was allowed to exert its will on its own, that would be true evil. But it's because the beings of the consciousness housed in this darkness is tightly controlled, that it's actually divine. Demons are actually divine, not of accord of their own nature, but of accord of the force that controls them to obey God's will at all times. Everything a demon does is according to God's will. So we have the darkness, which is the primordial chaos that the non-dual light's always expanding into, but the beauty of it is Saturn is the order that controls the darkness. Saturn is the aspect of God, of God that makes it so demons can't do fucking anything that they want to do. It's a convergence of demonic will and the will of God that allows demons to take any action. And the definition of what I've just said is Saturn. Saturn is the convergence of God's will and a demon's will. And so that's why Saturn exposes us to demons. It exposes us to the aspects of ourselves that we have connected to in the form of demons. And this is, once again, it's really important. The central idea of this channel is ascending souls and descending souls, because the way that God expresses itself through the hands of God, which are the planets, are going to be different depending on if it's an ascending soul or a descending soul. Saturn plays a really important role for descending souls in the sense that Saturn allows descending souls to be torn away from God and to form relationships and connections and deep impressions in the mind with demons, right? So that's what the people of lead are. The people of the Kali Yuga in this demonic time are people that are being taken by the hand by Saturn in a way that brings decrease and disgrace, right? Saturn brings disgrace, and it brings, that's a good way of putting it. We always have to talk in terms of two, because there's the ascending nature of Saturn, the descending. The descending nature, Saturn will bring the people of this time to a point of materiality, separation from spirit. The sun signifies spirit, Saturn signifies materiality, and separation. For the descending soul, it's Saturn that degrades the beauty of the soul, the splendor, the golden solar essence, the essence of the soul that is appropriate to the Satya Yuga, the golden age of the soul. Saturn brings it to the Kali Yuga. So Saturn is related to disgusting things and foul odors and ugliness, right? So Saturn also brings age. Saturn is associated with the old man. So to become old is to start to look ugly. And so for the descending soul, Saturn makes the soul ugly and repugnant and vile, and also plays a very big role in creating the 10,000 things. So Saturn is responsible for fragmentation. Saturn is responsible for separations, is the sickle of Cronus, which also separates time into moments and also separates to allow form. That Saturn has Binah in the Kabbalah, in the Tree of Life. Saturn also, in the descending soul journey, creates fragmentation of the self. For the ascending soul, which is the chosen one, Saturn it plays a very important role for the alchemical journey, which Saturn gives us an opportunity to confront our lead, to confront our wickedness and our vile demonic samskars, our impressions, our demonic impressions on our soul, our wickedness, our vileness, so that we have the opportunity to work with it in a productive, alchemical way. Okay? So we are exposed again to our demonic nature, but now in a way of harshness, now in a disciplinarian way, because Saturn is the great teacher. So in the descending soul journey, Saturn is like like a deadbeat dad. It's like, yeah, go ahead, go take drugs, go fuck yourself up. Oh, by the way, you know what? You want to fuck yourself up? Here's some drugs. Go fuck yourself up with them, you know? But when it's the ascending soul portion of the journey, it's like, all right, asshole, it's time to get serious. It's like that movie Whiplash, the music teacher who's like a really harsh disciplinarian teacher, a jazz music band teacher. That guy is like the spitting image of the archetype of Saturn as a disciplinarian teacher, particularly for ascending souls and chosen ones. So the really funny thing about it is the demonic people of this time, which are, again, you could think of them as projections of our own consciousness, but really they're also forms of consciousness, and they're also separate people that are connected to us by laws of resonance, but in truth they're not separate people because once again there is only God, and God is the mirror God, and we're all just the mirror God staring back into ourselves, the fragmented, fractured, kaleidoscopic, broken, shattered mirror. These separate people that attack us, these demonic people, they are a puppet, right? That's the funny thing, is they are a puppet, but they're a puppet of a puppet. A demon is a puppet because through the sheer grace and amazing power of God, God controls demons completely. Demons have no will of their own. God allows them the agency according to his plan to attack when he wants to, which is Saturn. So Saturn is the puppeteer of the demons, which are the puppeteers of the descending souls of this time, of this Kali Yuga, these demonic people that attack us. So really, just as a beginning introductory understanding of the planets and how they work as the nodes and hands of the divine, the hands of God. It's a really good place to start by seeing that the sun contains our good samskars, our pleasant and enjoyable samskars, and Saturn contains our impure and wretched and vile samskars that we are to confront. So it brings, as a projection, these demonic aspects of ourselves bring unwanted things and battles and unpleasant things. And this comes back to the concept called the daemon, which is not a demon. The daemon, and particularly the personal daemon in the ancient mysteries of the Greco-Egyptian time, the personal daemon is regarded as kind of like the divine double or the higher self, and things like this. And basically, you can see your personal daemon in your natal chart. So this is a spirit that's been appointed to us for only this specific lifetime that is responsible for creating a certain amount of evolution in a certain direction. So basically, the defects of our birth chart are representations of the will of the daemon. This is why in the Bible it advises against witchcraft, magic, because and really, like, Christianity in a lot of ways is kind of like a baby food version of spirituality. It's almost like I'm going to create these dictates because most of the people that read this are not going to be able to understand what I'm talking about anyways, and the reasons why we're doing these things. And if I were to tell them, they probably would pervert the teachings and use them in the wrong ways anyways. So I'm just going to give these stories and these parables and these dictates as to what to do, just to circumvent that whole mess, because most people are not at the level of consciousness to understand the will of God anyways. But this is the real reason why God says to not do witchcraft and to not practice divination. The reason God says to not use witchcraft is to respect the will of the daemon, because the daemon is there to create evolution for this particular lifetime in a certain direction. And if you use magic to get around that, then you're not going to evolve, right? If we agree that the will of the daemon is the forces of the planets as configured in your natal chart, and we use magic as a way of changing that so that it's a different expression of the planets, then by definition we are going against the particular evolutionary plan of what the daemon was put there for. What the personal daemon, the higher self, what some call the holy guardian angel, was put there for. So that's the real reason why it says to not do witchcraft. And it says to not do divination because if you know the events that are to come to pass, you will have braced yourself for the things that come, and you will probably plan around it. So that's another way of circumventing the will of the daemon and fate, because that fate is evolutionary in nature, is designed to create progress at the level of the soul. If you use divination, most of the time people are using divination as a way to try to get around things. So yeah, that's the real reason. With all of that said, there are ways that you can use magic to actually work with the will of the daemon, and therefore work in accordance with the will of God, because really the will of the daemon is the closest thing we'll know to the will of God. And principally that's theurgy, which is the use of magic to connect with God, which, by the way, for the salty Christians in the audience, that's what prayer is. And in fact, all theurgy is prayer over suffumigation, with the occasional animal sacrifice, but we don't play with that shit. So really the idea is that prayer is mostly ineffective because it's done in a really shitty way. There's a couple gods in the Bible that are from pretty early antiquity. There is the YHVH tetragrammaton, which some call Yahweh, but also there's El. These are different gods that were reconciled. Let's just put the egregores to the side, and put the names of the spirits to the side. There is just God, right? There is the non-dual light that created everything, that carries with it a logos. Let's just leave it there, because with that, we can all agree on that. And we don't need it to have a fucking certain name, which, by the way, you're not even supposed to speak anyways. God of the Bible, let's think a little bit bigger than that. Same God all throughout history. It's only barbarians that want to fight and kill each other that battle over the name and the cult of the God, but really the God is the non-dual light, the mirror God that created everything and carries with it an organizing principle, which is the logos, right? Leave it there. Also, clearly, the planets are part of the will of God, and it's how God carries out the intended will for the stories that are told. Because astrology plays such an obvious role in everything that happens, to the point that basically everything is predictable, which is why divination needs to be warned against anyways, because we can use astrology to predict everything that happens. That's how powerful the spirits of the planets are and how they rule everything, and they are the ultimate rulers of everything that happens. All these other spirits and demons and spirit names are all secondary or tertiary or lesser to the spirits of the planets, because the spirits of the planets are the ones that shake the world, because they're the hands of God. So that's why astrotheurgy is one of the most effective ways to not only to get results. So the prayer that we use, we're addressing the God of the Bible, is usually extremely weak prayer that has no results. But if we use the prayers that are present in the Picatrix, which is the book of astrological magic, you get big old results. And you get even bigger results when you burn incense, which is why a lot of Christians, they burn frankincense and other incenses like the frankincense and myrrh. Frankincense is one of the most powerful incenses in magic in general. But the science of incenses goes a lot deeper than that, which is why prayer is a lot more successful when you address it to the planets, because it's the hands of God, and we're much closer to the hands of God than the ultimate supreme non-dual divinity, which you could barely comprehend and is ineffable. So why would you even bother trying to talk to this God that's so far beyond your base, crude, material existence? Like, we're way down here in material existence, we're way down here on Earth. Why would you ever try to address the supremest divinity of all? You got to talk to a middleman. The middleman is the planets. And so, yeah, I bring all that up to say that a lot of the daemons that are appointed, spirits, the will of God, the blueprint of the will of God that's appointed to each individual, God's plan for you, the personal daemon, the natal chart, is kind of unpleasant and unfortunate for most people because we're born into the Kali Yuga. So Saturn kind of has your ass in the Kali Yuga. So a lot of these daemons are of a Saturnine agenda in different ways. For the descending souls, it's so that they can degrade and become more polluted and worse and more demonic. For the ascending souls, it's to reconfront the lead so that we could do alchemy with it, particularly through dredging up these images and archetypes that are present in our soul, projected outward as their experience, so we can use universal love and forgiveness to dissolve it. But sometimes, as chosen ones, our experience is very torturous and very unpleasant. And so, for that reason, we can draw from the Satya Yuga samskars. What that means is there is a version of us in another lifetime that is associated with the golden age, right? It's associated with the good times, the pleasant things, the desirable things, the purity. And those samskars, those impressions, are housed in the sun. And so I have a video on this channel, Blessing of the Sun, which is a great way of reducing the intensity of your karma if you are having a hard time doing the real important work, which is the Ho'oponopono cleaning, the forgiveness practice that allows you to dissolve your unpleasant samskars, to work alchemically with the lead and the people of lead. You will be attacked. You will be beset by all manner of unwanted things and difficulty and infirmities, all under the definition of Saturn from the Picatrix that I read. And we can draw from the samskars of the sun to take control of our shadow, like in the Greek magical papyri, the rite of using the Helios spell to take control of our shadow. And we use this brightness of the sun to cast away the shade, the darkness, which is ruled by Saturn, to reduce let me make it very clear, not to make it go away, but to postpone it. Alchemy and resolving our karma, resolving these samskars, this lead, these impurities in our soul, actually achieving the evolution is the only way to fully make it go away. If you use the magic of the sun, the blessing of the sun that I mentioned in the video on my channel, you are only postponing it. But it can be a good idea because sometimes you bite off more than you can chew in this lifetime. Clearly you've chosen too much, clearly some people have chosen too much evolutionary pressure. They've chosen too much karma. They've said, give me more lead. And they've reached a point that they have so much difficulty in life that they can't even work productively with all the shit that's being thrown at them. At that time, use the magic of the sun. Also, we have the Solomonic Pentacles, where the 5th pentacle of Mars is pretty much what you're looking for to reduce the demonic attack and to reduce the overall lead that you experience. But only use these things to reduce the challenge so that you can make it manageable to work with it alchemically. Never just postpone it so that you can fuck off and do nothing and just live the charmed life. We're not born on Earth here to live the charmed life. The world is evil anyways. We don't want to immerse ourselves in the things of the world. So let that thorn be in your flesh. And let those challenges and difficulties sit, maybe decrease the difficulty a little bit, but focus on using these difficulties as a way of detaching from the world and purifying your soul. Nice, we got it under an hour, and I think I was a little bit more concise and got more ideas out faster than last time. Thank you so much for watching Reflections on Saturn and Puppet of a Puppet. Adios, amigos.